Hey, Bitcoin wealth builders. Welcome to episode 87 of Bitcoin Hard Talk. Today, the main topic is going to be there's something that people have debated back and forth, and I'm going to be covering it more in the geopolitical section. Firstly, we'll do this week in Bitcoin, this week in macro, and this week in geopolitics. And the proof of weapons network was in full force, with the proof of work network really ushering in the peace to combat the weapons that were fired by the fiat currency debt-based Ponzi scheme. But many people are confused by the question of, does America control Israel or does Israel control America? And if you're familiar with my content, you'll know that this has been a back and forth debate. But I'm going to clear it up once and for all, and never was it more clear than this week, so that the real perpetrators of the genocide in Gaza can be correctly assigned rather than scapegoated. We're going to be covering all of that and more. And so if you are new to the show, welcome to Bitcoin Hard Talk episode 87. This is where we break down everything that happened this week in Bitcoin, this week in macro, and this week in geopolitics. We do it in 3 parts, and we're going to start with this week in Bitcoin as we transition to this world of Bitcoin, AI, and central bank digital currencies. So today we're going to be covering a little bit on the progress towards the US market structure bill. We're also going to be discussing the impact of the Federal Housing Finance Agency new policy, as well as the IMF, and also the 25% correction in hash power that happened exactly as the US was striking on Iran, and what we can read into that. This week in macro, we're going to be covering the Fed, we're going to be covering oil, we're going to be covering tariffs, and of course, we're going to be doing an update on the debt rollover, the $10 trillion debt rollover that the US has to go through this year. This week in geopolitics, we're going to be answering the question, does Israel really control America? And we're going to be going through the path to ceasefire and all the theatrics. If you watch the last 2 episodes of Bitcoin Hard Talk, you'll know exactly what was going to happen this week. And it happened exactly as we said, with a few little exceptions. And we'll go through all of that this week in geopolitics. You would have been on the right side of the oil trade. You would have known that it was market manipulation, and you would have known that the whole thing was scripted, drafted, and theatrics, because we covered exactly what would happen by following the money. And that is what we do at Bitcoin Hard Talk. We get you ahead of everything by following the money. So without further ado, let's jump right in to Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 87, part 1, this week in Bitcoin. So the big announcement today was that the crypto market structure bill is basically coming soon. And so the crypto market structure bill is designed after the Genius Act. So we've had the Genius Act implemented, which is stablecoins. The reason that took precedent over everything else is because it is clearly, if you've been watching Bitcoin Hard Talk, a long-term strategy for sucking up and dumping the last bits of US debt onto the American people so that the technocrats and the Trump administration can profit from the high interest rate yields as a result of rolling over the debt-based Ponzi scheme after the tariff policy that reset the world order into the multipolar world order that we've been covering for an awful long time. Well, after the Genius Act, once you got the stable coins covered, you'll have probably some radical monetary type of policy that we'll be covering more in the macro section. But after that, market structure. Market structure essentially means who's going to be regulating who. Is the SEC going to be regulating certain crypto assets as securities? Is the CFTC going to be regulating certain commodities, whether it be Bitcoin or other assets? And what about, the OCC? Is it going to be treated as a currency under the Federal Reserve structure? We shall see. This is what the Market Structure Act is set to do. And it gives clarity on exactly how you can engage with the Bitcoin and crypto market within the US regulatory framework. Whether exchanges need to register as money service businesses, do they need to register with each of the 52 states? Is it going to be done at the federal level? Is there going to be exemptions if it's treated as a currency, commodity, security? All of that is to be clarified, and that is all coming up in the market structure bill. The line of events that is meant to happen, and this is the one thing, if you remember way back when I said why you should vote for Trump over Genocide Joe and Holocaust Harris is because, firstly, you need to punish them for the genocide, but everything will continue in the same because it's BlackRock and the Proof of Weapons Network that set the policy. But from Trump, you will get a different environment with Bitcoin, which allows you to free yourself and boycott the Federal Reserve. You boycott the Federal Reserve by saving in Bitcoin rather than saving in dollars. And when you save in Bitcoin, you can boycott BlackRock by holding it in self-custody. And when you hold it in self-custody, if your wealth increases over time by owning more Bitcoin each month, you can at some point decide whether you want to pay down your debt. You boycott the banks by paying down your debt. And you boycott the global proof of weapons corporate structure by spending local. And so Bitcoin allows you to slowly free yourself so that then you can free your companies and your corporations. And eventually, when the proof of weapons network implodes upon itself, maybe you can have bit bonds and various other corporate structures that many of the countries, for example, the Kingdom of Bhutan, which now has 50% of its GDP in Bitcoin, thanks to its Bitcoin mining strategy by utilizing its geoenergy, based upon its water and dams and various other things. And we're going to be covering exactly how it also protects you from any type of, if you need an insulated economy like Iran, we're going to be going through how I think that's happening and how you can remain sovereign despite what outside aggressors may be trying to do to you. And that's the whole point here. Sovereign individuals, sovereign corporations, and sovereign countries, so that we can actually move to an environment of competition rather than global hegemon, and we can defang the proof of weapons network that requires a debt-based Ponzi scheme to fund never-ending forever wars and just all the atrocities and crimes against humanity that is required in order to prop up the dollar and make the debt fuel Ponzi scheme roll, while it also implodes upon itself and creates civil unrest in America, civil unrest in UK, backed by the Bank of England, civil unrest in the European Union, backed by the European Union, civil unrest around the world, backed by the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the Bank for International Settlements, and countries that resist against it by remaining sovereign and resisting a debt-based Ponzi scheme inflicted by the Bank for International Settlements, why financial weapons of mass destruction are thrown around the world by the policies of the Financial Action Task Force. In this deconstruction, this weaponization of the post-World War II order that was set up at Bretton Woods. Well, anyway, at the same time, the director of digital assets says that the US is committed to passing crypto market structure legislation by September. So this is the one thing where I think the Trump administration has been completely on point. Why? Because Trump is hedging against the dollar as he invests in this multipolar world through investments across the Middle East, loans from ICB China to build Trump towers around the world, and short the dollar and go long Bitcoin. As through World Liberty Financial, he loads up on all the Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin ETFs, so that he can personally enrich himself as we transition to turning America into a surveillance, one big beautiful bill, Palantir controlled technocracy that you need to protect yourself with Bitcoin, and at least you can do it in self-custody. Don't own it with BlackRock, own it for yourself. By September, it is a race to accumulate as much Bitcoin. Work hard, earn as much fiat currency as you can. Your job will be over by artificial intelligence in the next decade, if not sooner. In the next 5 years, I'm already starting to see many of the companies that I've invested in over 100 different companies over the time. They are replacing their developers with artificial intelligence as we speak. That is a global trend. You need to prepare yourself. You need to accumulate with your fiat currency as much Bitcoin as possible. And you need to own more Bitcoin this month than the previous month. And you'll have the proof of work to protect yourself from the violent proof of weapons network that is imploding on itself. And we're trying to just avoid World War III. Fortunately, because of the theater, we'll cover this more in part 3, I think we've avoided World War III, but you need to protect yourself in the transition, just as Trump is protecting himself and his family by shorting the dollar, issuing stable coins, and going long Bitcoin. So Trump says that he wants the legal framework for crypto on his desk immediately. In fact, quote, "Get it on my desk ASAP, no delays." So Trump knows that he wants that through, and this is going to be his legacy on top of what we're going to be covering in the geopolitical section. Obviously, if you followed, you know the real story, because we follow the money and understand the power structure of the world, and that the Trump administration simply works for the proof of work weapons network, which is control of the deep state. The deep state is under the military industrial complex, and the military is one faction of the financial industrial complex, big pharma, the consumer, and the tech side, which is all managed through the large asset managers like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, which get to use the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve shareholders, the banks that sit underneath it, they get to create digital dollars every time they issue a loan. And so through AI like Aladdin that's controlled by BlackRock, you can control monetary policy at the Federal Reserve level, and you can also control fiscal policy through the software that's being used at the Treasury level, as well as all the large capital flows, as every fund manager and money manager and endowment fund in the world and hedge fund uses the same technology to push out the same signals as they meet every single week in Bilderberg at the World Economic Forum meetings, just like they did a couple of weeks ago. Go down the list and you'll see who runs America, who runs UK, who runs EU, and they are pushed against in this multipolar world. And you can just see the real power structure of the world. But at the same time, now with this transition into a world of Bitcoin, AI, and CBDCs, the US Federal Housing Finance Agency has been ordered Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are the government-led debt-based Ponzi schemes that try to get as much mortgages out there so that banks can profit from issuing the dollar, and they get to create money every time they issue a mortgage, and it's guaranteed by certain deposits in the FDIC, which, by the way, FDIC only has 1% of the entire deposit market insured. 99% is covered by the government. The government means that they can socialize the losses, privatize the gains, and you have organizations like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to pump the debt-based Ponzi scheme and steal more money from the average American person owned over to those that own the assets, which is creating this generational divide between the boomers and Generation X that is causing civil unrest right now, and also is going to be leading to this ginormous wealth transfer. As the elder boomer generation pass away and pass on their wealth, those people are Bitcoiners. They're crypto people. They spend in stable coins. They invest in artificial intelligence. They save in Bitcoin. What do you think they're going to do when they receive that multi-trillion-dollar redistribution of wealth from those that that didn't get into Bitcoin and made all their money on their housing? They're going to be selling. They're going to be buying Bitcoin, and they're going to be using their Bitcoin and crypto reserves as part of their wealth effect, based upon savings rather than a debt-based Ponzi scheme. This is the intergenerational wealth transfer, and you need to make sure that you're on the right side of this. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, when assessing whether to lend to you and what your credit rating previously, they didn't consider your Bitcoin or crypto assets. So if you had your Bitcoin in self-custody, then they wouldn't consider that as part of your net worth in assessing whether you are mortgage ready. Now, most of the Bitcoiners that I know, they end up saving in Bitcoin. And because Bitcoin every 4 years, if you add more Bitcoin every month, has outperformed every hedge fund, every money manager, all the stock markets, all the bond markets, gold, real estate, every asset class, the assets of the rich and wealthy, because it has beaten all of them, hedge funds, venture capital, they tend to just end up buying their houses outright. But sometimes they don't want to buy their houses outright because they want to keep the Bitcoin. Well, now you can apply for a mortgage, and they've ordered Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to assess you, not just based upon your traditional assets, but your Bitcoin and crypto assets as well. This means essentially that the categorization of Bitcoin and crypto will just manifest its way down through the banking system. But there is a bit of a honey trap that you need to be aware of. The honey trap is that while the US housing agency may allow crypto assets in mortgage qualification, it looks like that the Bitcoin has to be held in custody. So they want you to hold it either through the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, or they want you to hold it in Coinbase where they have it in custody for it to qualify. So they're not allowing, in the initial phase, for your self-custody to be counted. And so obviously this is a centralized honeypot trap, which also means that it doesn't matter too much. It means that when you've got your Bitcoin in self-custody, if you want to qualify for a mortgage and have your assets considered, add to your Bitcoin each month. And once your net worth is worth a certain amount, you can take some of your self-custody Bitcoin, deposit it to a platform like Coinbase, and then you can get a statement, and then they can assess your ability to take on a mortgage based upon the amount that you have in Coinbase. It does not mean that you should be storing your Bitcoin with a custodian. It means that you should be developing the self-sovereign strategy, because if the US ever does in a Great Depression what it did in 1933 and decides that it says US people can no longer own gold, guess who they're going to come after first? They're going to say, here's some central bank digital currency, or here's some Trump stablecoin, USD1, or here's some Circle USDC, and you have to convert your Bitcoin into our strategic reserves, and you receive some stablecoin. Now, I'm not saying that will happen, but the first place they will go is after the custodians, which is why you want your self-sovereign, self-custody. And if you don't like the policy of your country, you can get the hell to any country that you like and bring it with you just by remembering your phrase in your head, because Bitcoin is fully transportable, fully auditable, fully digital as you choose. And that is the beauty and the power of not being connected to one country's policy. But anyway, you'll be able to use it. So this really helps with the categorization. It means that it will probably start to be used within all the different types of systems, as well as banks putting it on their balance sheet and various other things that are coming. But obviously they want your Bitcoin, and you want to be self-sovereign and only put it in their system for the amount that you want to use. So what else did we have this today? Well, we often quote one of the big platforms that people use as an indicator of how people are thinking is a crypto prediction market called Polymarket. During the election, it becomes really, really popular as a gauge in which people predict, whether who the next president might be, what the results of election will be. I used it throughout the war as well to talk about the prediction of whether the US would strike Iran and various other markets that they put together. Now, it tends to be a little bit biased towards the crypto bros, and the crypto bros, if they're Bitcoiners that watch Bitcoin Hard Talk, they tend to be a bit more switched on, because if you follow my show, you follow the money, and you understand the corruption of the proof of weapons network. You're not just that normal person that watches Fox News and CNN or falls for the Mockingbird CIA operations when they took over the media and pay influencers like Mossad agents like Laura Loomer, who want to spread false propaganda to make you feel a certain way so that you end up on the wrong end of the proof of weapons network. And then you beg for Palantir on open border policies, thinking that these things, open border policies, mass deportations. We must need Palantir to protect the border because there's these Hamas jihadi terrorists that are coming through the border. You don't fall for any of that stuff. You know who funds the different groups. You're very familiar with that because you watch what we cover in part 3. Follow the money tells you the truth, completely different area. But so when you're doing Polymarket, now personally for religious reasons, I do not gamble. It's strictly prohibited for me. But there is a platform that I use in order to gauge what other people are thinking. And it has got a lot of traction. So it was announced today that they just raised $200 million in a funding round, which was led by the top venture fund, Founders Fund. Who is Founders Fund? Founders Fund is Peter Thiel. Who's Peter Thiel? The US military industrial complex Mossad agent that was selected as the PayPal mafia in order to create technology for military surveillance, including Palantir. How was Palantir funded? From funds based upon his funder, Jeffrey Epstein. So the proof of weapons network is coming around, and guess what it's investing in? Founders Fund is investing in market prediction crypto polymarket. What do you think that $200 million is for? In order to manipulate the data, in order to control outcomes, so that it can be a tool of the proof of weapons network and the surveillance state that Palantir is ushering in. Follow the money, and you'll find out that that prediction market is about to be weaponized against you and provide the data, just like the social credit score that he is ushering in, beta testing his occupation as a service, genocide as a service technology in Gaza, the drone technology in Ukraine, and the civil unrest surveillance state in UK and EU that is about to come together into one big, beautiful bill that Trump is ushering in for Peter Thiel, all connected to Jeffrey Epstein, whether it be Elon Musk, whether it be Donald Trump, whether it be Peter Thiel, all in the same network that is building the surveillance state in America. And guess what? You are cheering, make America great again. And Trump is building the network, and it doesn't matter. Trump is Trump. It's the same under Biden. It's the same under Obama. It's a unipolar, technocratic, and you're meant to believe the presidents are there to give you a narrative that makes it acceptable. Of course, that is what it's all about. So you can tell by following the money, the larger agenda. So Polymarket, $200 million from Founders Fund. Just going to take a bit of water. Excuse me, I've been on Spaces all week covering. Last week I was a bit struggling. My voice is recovering a little bit right now, but bear with me. The show must go on. We got to make sure that you're ahead of it, because the rate of change due to artificial intelligence that is happening is, I've got to give you the information each week, because if I waited a day, everything would have changed, and I need to make sure you are up to date. Right, what else happened in the Bitcoin and crypto market? Well, GameStop raised another 450 million. They said this is potentially to buy more Bitcoin. And so GameStop is becoming, they've got over $5 billion on the balance sheet. And now they've raised another $450 million. What else did we have? One of the early companies that I invested in many years ago, Circle, they recently went public. And interestingly, their market capitalization is now, or it went greater than Coinbase. Now, what's a bit strange about that is that the Circle issues the USDC stablecoin. It's the second largest stablecoin, but it's launched within America. Within America, it's actually issued through a partnership with Coinbase. And so, while if you want, exposure to stablecoins, then you have to buy Circle because it's the only publicly traded company that is a pure play stablecoin company. But even though Coinbase receives much of the profits from USDC, Circle was so popular after the IPO, one of the most successful IPOs that I've seen for a long time, that now its market cap is bigger than Coinbase, and it's even bigger than USDC stablecoin itself. So the market is valuing it very highly. Just before the IPO, it got an investment from BlackRock. When BlackRock invested, that is the assumption that they're going to put a lot of assets behind it. What else is happening? Obviously, we've got Genius Act coming through. We've got the debt crisis. The debt needs new markets. Do you think stablecoins are going to be used in order to back some of the debt? I think so. Everything's moving in that direction. And those in the know, those that, BlackRock got ahead of it, and those in the know are purchasing and overvaluing relative to Coinbase, the Circle stock. So do with that information as you choose. Excuse me. But as stablecoins grow, we're probably going to reach the point where, how you have these different measures of money supply. You have M0, which is, the money that's held at the Federal Reserve by the banks. And then you have like M1, which involves all the cash equivalent deposits. And then you have M2, which includes various other highly liquid money market funds. And then as you go to M3, it includes more exotic instruments, which are less liquid, including many of the less liquid money market funds. And then you have M4, which includes all the shadow banking and various derivatives. And you really can't measure money because money is debt in a debt-based Ponzi scheme. But what happens when you start issuing these stable coins? I'm pretty sure that eventually you're going to have maybe like a new M0.5 or M5, which measures the amount that is in these stable coins. And then because what happens with these stable coins, essentially what happens is somebody takes $1 from the fiat currency proof of weapons network. They deposit it with the stablecoin issuer. The stablecoin issuer then issues the equivalent of a digital dollar on a blockchain that you can then spend on, basically, rather than like a bank deposit where it's a guilty until proved innocent system, you have to prove everything before you can spend it. Stable coins can be taken out of the platform and then used as an innocent until proven guilty system. So you can spend it. There's obviously surveillance. Everything can be seen on a blockchain. The stablecoin issuer can freeze the coins if it chooses, but you can spend them freely. And so you get this innocent until proven guilty system. Now, what do they do with the money? Well, they basically lend it to the US government by buying treasuries, and then they can invest it in different things. But as they receive a yield on those investments, once stable coins like Tether, they buy Bitcoin. So they get like a free Bitcoin position on the back of the debt-based Ponzi scheme, and they get a free investment by issuing this digital dollar on a blockchain. And so that's the model. And so you can imagine, as more and more stable coins get issued, now the Genius Act is through and this starts going global, and you have this new money supply measure of the stable coins, you can imagine that the ratings agencies like Standard & Poor's and Moody's and S&P, they're going to start issuing, statistics and ratings based upon all these different stable coins. And as more people start to share the yield, people are going to start accepting stable coins, receive yield in real time. There'll be different grades. You can make them interoperable. And then as more and more merchants start accepting them, why would you use a bank? This is where it's all going. And this is why the technocracy is trying to take it over. And then they're using the data with artificial intelligence to build up that social credit score to integrate with this. Then those crypto assets will be available for you to use as part of your credit rating when you're trying to borrow those stable coins against it. And if you've watched previous episodes, you'll know why I tell you Bitcoin, self-custody, and how they're building up a massive infrastructure using the Federal Reserve's Operation Choke Point 3.0, let's call it, through Cantor Fitzgerald and other deep state actors in order to try and end up with as much of your Bitcoin as possible. Go through previous videos. The banks want your Bitcoin and various other ones on my YouTube channel if you want to understand more about that. Okay. Right. There was another big event this week. Now, we'll cover more about this in the geopolitics, but we had the theater of the US putting strikes on Iran. And immediately I was following the market. So when I was live on all the spaces, everyone was said, we're going to World War III. I said, we're not going to World War III. In fact, the price of oil has gone down 8% while this strike has happened. This is all theater. Everybody knew about it. That is in the need to know, and it is designed to scare the shit out of you so that you can usher in the big, beautiful bill and sign up for a surveillance state. So I was calming people down as this was happening, telling them the truth, and people were getting really angry at me. How dare you say my country would not engage in anything like this? This is World War III. Israel controls America, and they're going to pull America into the war, and this is going to be World War III. And I was saying, calm down, calm down, calm down. This is very, very predictable. And all the Bitcoin hard talk people were saying, yeah, we saw that one coming. And the market was telling us the truth. We were following the money. Everybody was following the media. The people in the media were having a hernia thinking we're going to World War III. And anybody in Bitcoin hard talk, we were kind of laughing behind the scenes as people were panicking. Anyway, what else did we notice? Well, if you are following, we always talk about proof of work. And proof of work is the security network that backs up Bitcoin. It is the world's largest distributed supercomputer in the world. And it exists where people mine Bitcoin in China, America, Europe, Iran, Russia. It's distributed all around the world. Some of the African nations, Latin, Central, South America. And it's distributed around the world, which is why no one can shut it down. And no one country controls it. You have nodes where everybody backs up a copy. You can run your node. It's trivial to run it. And you can verify your own transactions and remain completely sovereign. I recommend you do that as we get deeper and deeper into this world. But by looking at the hash power, we can start to get clues by following the money that others aren't following. Excuse me. I keep trying to get my voice protected, but so I'll keep making sure. By the end of last week, we were very scratchy, but I'll keep going anyway. Well, anyway, Iran's Bitcoin mining industry, it may be bigger than some of us thought. It's been reported often, but we don't really have the exact information. But really, it's fueled by the fact that Iran is an energy, it's got its own oil supplies and various other access in the Middle East to LNG and various other things. And so in the Middle East, they have access to the cheapest electricity and gas. And at the same time, when you sanction a country like Russia and Iran, which are the two most sanctioned countries in the world, you tend to need something internal to fuel your economy. And while you're fueling your economy, remember Iran and Egypt joined BRICS, which is led by China, and Russia is currently, part of that network. You tend to put yourself in a position where if you fuel your internal economy on Bitcoin, and then Russia started announcing that it's launching Bitcoin structured product bonds, and you can bet your bottom dollar that China, which produces ASICs, Taiwan, which produces the chips for Bitcoin mining, and America, which produces 40% of the energy through curtailment and its efficient use of the energy grid in order to utilize wasted electricity. And when there is more demand, there's subsidies that pay for the Bitcoin miners to mine less, and you can manage all of your electricity grid. You can bet your bottom dollar that the countries in the Middle East already have vast Bitcoin strategic reserves. And from the people that I know, I can tell you that that's true as well. They're just not announcing it. But this is also fueling into GCC trade and into BRICS trade. And so they are trading using Bitcoin as the mechanism for clearing rather than using the US dollar. And through this barter network that was created through BRICS, a de-dollarization process, we've now got $1 trillion of inter-BRICS trade that's happening. And you've got these internal Bitcoin mining networks that are allowing for this inter-Bitcoin trades that are happening as well. But there is a bit of a downside for certain countries. Obviously, Bitcoin mining is backed by a lot of electricity. Now, once you've got a very efficient network like Texas has, you can really utilize Bitcoin mining to manage the electricity grid and make your electricity way more efficient. But we haven't seen such types of things within Iran yet. And so Iran suffers from electricity shortages and various other things as well. But it seems like a lot of energy has been used by Iran in Bitcoin mining because it has these power shortages. Now, while we're negotiating, remember I talked about last week, one of the targets of Israel was the Iranian crypto exchange, where it stole 15 million Iranians' money, a civilian attack, in order to try and do part of its civilian targets. While they're suffering power shortages, could this be nuclear energy? And so I've always talked about how this is not about nuclear weapons. We'll go through more of that in the geopolitical section. This has always been about nuclear energy, powering artificial intelligence, Bitcoin mining, and various other technology plays. And obviously, we know how the proof of weapons network, they create a whole story around how they're building a bomb and they're trying to implement Sharia law to take over the world. This is all narrative, just as anyone that follows the money knows. And so those shortages is why that we're starting to see that. But as they do more and more Bitcoin mining, we know from one of the public companies in America is a company called Terra. And excuse me. Nothing to do with Terra Luna, the Ponzi scheme that was created to back a stablecoin that lost $60 billion of market value. But Terra Wolf, which is, they basically turned a nuclear power plant into a Bitcoin mining operation. And they could mine for approximately 2 cents while everybody else was on about 4 cents. So that is an incredible achievement, but it doesn't scale. You've got to scale those nuclear power plants. What does the Middle East want to do? What does Iran want to do? What does the whole region want to do? What does America want to do? What does China want to do? What was Germany doing? But before BlackRock decided to vassalize Ukraine and destroy Europe by switching off nuclear energy in Germany, what did they do? Well, they were all trying to harness nuclear energy. So nuclear energy connected to Bitcoin mining can stop those power shortages. Again, this is a tool of sanctions in order to destroy an economy and make it where you can have uprisings against your leadership, because you have to engage in all these different types of networks to get things flowing as well. Well, anyway, this is what it's all about. It's about energy. So as we started to see, the news broke that essentially the US was bombing Iran's nuclear facilities, we suddenly, at the very same time, had the global Bitcoin hash rate, which is completely measured. It's always at new all-time highs, but we had a plummet in the amount of hash rate that was backing the Bitcoin network. In fact, the Bitcoin hash rate dropped approximately 200 exahashes. To put that in context, Bitcoin is about 1,000 exahashes. That's about 1 quadrillion maths problems per second globally in order to secure this network that no government can shut down in this distributed supercomputer that verifies all the transactions without a need for a central bank. 25% of the network is a staggering 25% of the network that went down in approximately 24 hours. Now, this is also a great beta test of how anti-fragile Bitcoin is. It takes any situation, and the way Bitcoin is designed is if you have a sudden drop in hash power, that can lead to delayed transactions, and transactions go into blocks every 10 minutes. And it may take longer than 10 minutes to verify those transactions, but every 2 weeks, the difficulty rate adjusts. A difficulty rate is how difficult it is to mine a Bitcoin. That's the reward for the Bitcoin miners. Every 10 minutes, they receive, a Bitcoin subsidy for mining Bitcoin. They act as central bank in a decentralized way based upon code that nobody can change, so that you know the exact monetary policy and there's no human intervention. Well, if you get a drop in 24 hours of 25%, you're going to have some difficulty rate adjustment, and then it will bounce right back based upon plugging in that security somewhere else, because it creates in those 2 weeks the opportunity for excess profits, and from the miners that are still mining, and the ones that were shut down, they get they get the hit. And if they can't sell enough Bitcoin to cover their electricity costs, it's a very efficient industry. I used to be involved in Bitcoin mining about 2013, 2014. We were running a very large operation in Iceland. And at one point, the electricity became more than the country could spare. But we backed it up by a Bitcoin mining bond, which ended up being one of the highest returning investments, beat the hell out of all of the different bonds. We launched that in 2014. Interestingly, there was a presentation this week from some of the traditional TradFi players that wanted to launch Bitcoin bonds as a mechanism for paying down the US national debt and backing it by an equivalent asset in Bitcoin, which is very interesting to see as well. Okay, well, anyway, This wasn't a normal fluctuation in hash power. This was a massive, and it was basically it was an event that it lined up perfectly with what happened on the military strike. So not all of the 25% reduction in hash rate could be attributed to Iran, because at the same time, there was droughts and power shortages and curtailment happening within Texas. So there was a need for Texas energy, which led to, because I'm a shareholder in some of the mining companies, those that were, you know that many of those mining companies do this curtailment trade where they get paid in order to stop mining to fulfill some of the energy needs of Texas. Well, so you can't basically attribute everything to Iran, but a portion, I think, certainly was attributed because it lined up almost exactly. So if we know, and I said at the time, if that hash power comes back online, then we know that many of the rumors that I'll be covering in the geopolitical section and the evidence that was provided is that this is theater, because we know that much of the enriched uranium was actually moved ahead of the actual bomb. And I'll cover that more in the geopolitical section. But I said one of the ways to knowing is if that hash power comes right back on. Now, obviously, some of it can be attributed to the curtailment in Texas, but this would be an indication that the mining can just happen. And so, therefore, this is many of the theatrics I've been predicting. And this is the most basically obvious implication that Iran, the strikes from the US, they could have impacted the hash rate in Bitcoin, and they could have been using this nuclear energy to power some of the Bitcoin, which gives them a big advantage, which means that they may have a much, much bigger Bitcoin reserve than we can imagine. And it's probably vastly bigger than the 2% that has publicly been estimated. So it's been estimated that 2% of the Bitcoin mining happens in Iran. I think it could be a lot more. And it also plays to the fact that it came back on. So, not shortly after, the hash power came right back up and the 25% hole was plugged immediately. So I reckon that they've been likely mining in the shadow for years, just as many other have in the Middle East. And I reckon countries like the GCC and Qatar and Saudi Arabia, I reckon they build up a lot more Bitcoin strategic reserves than you can imagine as well, which implies that if the GCC are building up, if BRICS are building up, and they're now doing trades in Bitcoin, then America better get its Bitcoin strategic reserves. What's its priority? Firstly, it's doing stablecoins so it can handle the national debt, back some of its debt by stablecoin. Then it's doing market structure so it can start to figure out who's regulating who. Then it's meant to be doing Bitcoin strategic reserves. All in that meantime, what are all the technocrats doing? What is everyone? They're loading up in Bitcoin. People think that this is the top of the market. There is always Bitcoin as it reaches now a $2 trillion market cap, and gold is the number one asset. Bitcoin is now the 6th largest asset in the world. We even had NVIDIA became, behind gold, the largest asset in the world. NVIDIA powers artificial intelligence, and now you've got Microsoft, Apple, Google, and various other ones behind. Bitcoin is bigger than silver market cap. So now you have gold, number one asset in the world, NVIDIA, number two, artificial intelligence, all the companies that are building the robotics infrastructure and the AI, artificial intelligence infrastructure, then Bitcoin, then silver underneath it, and Saudi Aramco. You can see where the world is going. If you follow the money, energy, artificial intelligence, when all those jobs goes, what are they going to do? Stable coins, universal basic income, and those more authoritarian countries like European Union and UK and various other countries like China who have their central bank digital currencies. Follow the money, you get ahead of it. How do you protect yourself? Save in Bitcoin, own more Bitcoin this month than the previous month, put it in self-custody, and you can protect yourself from all of this. The countries that need protection, they're building their Bitcoin strategic reserves. As this power play happens, you're going to see countries shift in power based upon Bitcoin reserves. Companies that are protecting themselves from bankruptcy by owning Bitcoin treasuries. Individuals that are protecting themselves from the bankruptcy of the fiat currency proof of weapons network that are using Bitcoin strategic reserves as individuals. States like Texas saving their electricity grids based upon cartelment and having a Bitcoin mining industry. Countries like Iran and Russia using bonds in order to protect themselves as they engage in these proof of weapons network things. Protecting themselves from sanctions in Iran using Bitcoin mining. Countries like China using Bitcoin with the BRICS network in order to settle trades and power the various aspects. If you cannot see where this is going by now, then I don't know what else to say. You're just not watching and paying attention on Bitcoin Hard Talk. You need to pay attention further. This is digital hard sound money that is going to be the protection in a world of Bitcoin, AI, and central bank digital currencies. So what else did we have? Well, some of the companies, the public companies that do Bitcoin mining, CoreWeave, basically one of the Bitcoin mining companies, they're buying Core Scientific. Core Scientific it used to trade on the Canadian Stock Exchange. It now moved over to the American Stock Exchange. And now they are merging. That led to a 33% increase in price. Now, I'm not saying whether you should own Bitcoin miners. It is a very, very hard business. I was involved in that a long time ago. It's a very efficient business. Yeah, so I'm not saying whether you should invest in mining companies or not. You know, what I've found, in fact, is that Bitcoin miners, they tend to be mechanisms to play in the debt capital markets and the equity capital markets to enrich the executive teams. The compensation and stock options are through the roof. And so it's a very hard business to manage. You have to raise money at the right time. You're involved in the trade war because your ASICs comes from China. You're involved in the shortages from ASIC chips. So you have to get the Taiwanese trade to be working. That relies upon rare earth minerals. You then have to have access to the cheapest electricity. If you're doing it in America, you can benefit from curtailment in managing electricity. But you basically have to get the equipment plugged in. When there's a nuclear competition, that's going to be very tricky for the miners to manage. They're also integrating with artificial intelligence infrastructure so that data centers that are providing energy for big compute and AI also can mine. It's an amazing industry. It's a great one to watch, but it's a very tricky business to manage in terms of those trade flows, timing, and everything in Bitcoin is all about speed of execution, timing, and therefore you have to raise in the debt capital markets. And they tend to issue the executives too much stock options based upon their ability to manage it. So anyway, right, what else have we got? So a couple of more stories in the Bitcoin section, and then we'll move over to this week in macro. Oh, we had some updates. So over in March, the International Monetary Fund, the economic hitman. If you haven't read John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, that helps you understand what the IMF is for. The IMF is a terrorist organization that is designed to push the dollar around the world for the proof of weapons network by covert regime change and working with the deep state, the CIA, Mossad, and MI6 in order to create war, death, and destruction so that you can vassalize countries. You can use financial weapons of mass destruction and hedge funds in order to take over their capital markets, get them addicted to dollar debt, and then you can deplete their reserves of local currency so they become a full vassal state. And you can control countries. This has been the American colonial playbook since it took over the British Empire. But the economic hitmen at the IMF have now decided that they can't ignore it anymore. They have now officially classified Bitcoin as a capital asset. Now, what does it categorizing as a capital asset actually mean? Well, it means that it is a non-produced asset. It means that it's not created, like a company or anything like that. It is more like a natural asset, and it is a non-financial asset. So they're treating it like a commodity. Basically, by categorizing it like this, they're treating Bitcoin in the same way they treat gold and land. That means that in the future, if central banks want to use it as their reserves, this is the type of categorization that is needed. It's basically recognize that Bitcoin is decentralized in nature. And because there isn't an issuer, unlike all other cryptocurrencies, which have a pre-miner foundation, you can control it by owning the stakes through proof of stake. They have classified Bitcoin's proof of work as decentralized, a commodity-like feature, a lack of no issuer, and so therefore they think that is the type of reserve asset that if a central bank wanted to hold it, they could also hold it as a reserve asset. Now, I'm not aware of any central bank that's doing that at the moment. I do know that the Czech Republic central bank was looking to do that as part of an investigation. I'm not sure if it got, but this distinguishes it basically from all other crypto assets and stable coins, which are essentially classified as what they're called financial instruments. In the European Union, a financial instruments means that you have to comply with Markets in Financial Instrument Directive. But there's also one that's bespoke for crypto assets as well. So anyway, this is the International Monetary Fund recognizing Bitcoin's decentralized nature and recognizing that you basically have to adjust to this new commodity that exists. That's the financial and economic hitmen at the IMF couldn't beat us, so they had to join us. They obviously also threatened any country like El Salvador that wanted a Bitcoin policy and made sure that they got enough dollar loans so that they could try and add conditions to any Bitcoin policy. But if they just had accumulated enough Bitcoin, they would have remained sovereign and they wouldn't need to have bowed down to the economic hitmen that caused their civil wars, funded guerrilla warfare, and created so much death and destruction that led to a gang takeover of the country so that America could get it addicted to dollars, dollarize the economy, and steal all of its resources and overthrow its country as it does all around the world. But a country that was not colonized by America was the Kingdom of Bhutan. And it is protecting itself from being colonized by China because now half of its GDP is held in its Bitcoin. And it has got a very innovative Bitcoin mining industry and operation that harnesses its dam and energy that can be produced by wave and water power. And so congratulations to the Kingdom of Bhutan. You have, I think, successfully protected yourself and remained sovereign by harnessing all the power of Bitcoin combined with natural energy in order to get half of your GDP. I believe that that will protect you from the International Monetary Fund economic hitmen should they ever try to attack you, or even if you wanted negotiation power with the China Belt and Road Initiative. And that is the model that is open to every single country in the world, should they choose it. And that is the transition that we're going through. And that is why there is so much more to Bitcoin than meets the eye right now. Now, you need to make sure that you own more Bitcoin this month. You boycott the Federal Reserve by owning it in self-custody to boycott BlackRock. When you need to pay down your debt, you can boycott the banks by increasing through a wealth effect. And you can boycott the global network of surveillance by working, earning, investing, spending in local and build those community systems so that we can use the Bitcoin model to have decentralized identity, decentralized artificial intelligence, decentralized internet, decentralized money as we have with Bitcoin, and all of the tools that we can build around it in order to produce this resistance against centralized control through command and control of the surveillance state, where Palantir and social credit scores get integrated into many of these centralized stablecoins and central bank digital currencies. And that's everything that happened just this week in Bitcoin. We'll be back next week. So now we're going to move over to part two. In part two, we're going to be covering this week in macro, and we're going to be focusing on the debt rollover strategy, the updates in tariffs, the pump and dump that happened in oil, and where we go next. So let's jump straight into part two. this week in macro. Right, immediately we saw, right, hold on, just before we get started, I forgot to say, we are just 750 people away on YouTube from hitting the 100K milestone of subscribers. If you watch my video and you like this content, I need you, if you're not a subscriber, to go over to YouTube right now, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell symbol, hit all. We have been shadow banned for a long time, but we're hitting a critical mass through organic sharing. Once we hit 100K, YouTube will do a review. And because I think the content that used to be way more controversial is coming true, I reckon they'll unshadow ban me, but I need your help to get to 100,000. And I need more people to be protected. So please share this content. That's helping me organically get to 100,000. And do me a favor. I think that if you hit the subscribe button, even if you're subscribed already, then hit the bell symbol, then hit all, you'll start getting those notifications again. And you will start actually receiving the content, and that will help us get the rankings that's needed in order to protect more people as we transition to this world of Bitcoin, AI, and CBDCs. Now, just in case that review leads to me getting banned altogether, I also stream these on X and all of my immediate updates. And if you want to interact with me, you can join me. You'll get a notification on X if you follow me, and then make sure that you put all so that you get those notifications every time I go live. Then you can join a space, you can ask me a question, and you can get everything that's happening in real time. If that all goes wrong, we stream it on Rumble. So follow me over on Rumble. I've got a tiny little following relative to X and YouTube. I'm over 200,000 on X, 100,000 approaching on YouTube, and then I think we got under 1,000 on Rumble. But that's going to be the backup plan. So follow me over there. And if all goes wrong, make sure that you go to simondixon.com and you get my newsletter and you create your free membership to the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal, where everything is completely free. You can get a digital copy of my book, The Great Depression of the 2020s video series, where I forecasted in 2009, I uploaded that video, Great Depression of the 2020s, told everyone how I'm investing in 2019. You can get that, and those rules apply as well. I'm going to be doing a review in 2026 of how those strategies worked and what changed based upon what happened. And you'll be the ones that get that in the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal. It's completely free. Get yourself a username and log in. And then you also get an email every week to make sure you don't miss a thing. So with that in mind, let's move over to part 2, this week in macro. I'm going to take a little bit of a water break. Now, what I'd like you to do while I'm doing that is hit the like button, hit the bell symbol, retweet this, repost this, do me some favor, because I need more and more people to watch this content.